Okay, so welcome. This is going to be a discussion about high-energy particle physics and the arts. And what does the arts have to do with high-energy particle physics? And what does high-energy particle physics have to do with the arts? Well, I would say at the moment we're at this incredible time in our history. And it's the moment of great interactivity and excitement between the arts and, in particular, particle physics, not least because CERN has obviously discovered the Higgs boson, but also because CERN is continuing to push the parameters of the known world, the material world, and take us even further. And it's really capturing the imagination of the public as well as artists themselves. Only this week we had the world premiere of a ballet at CMS, which was hosted at CMS, one of the detectors on the CERN ring. It was the world premiere of a ballet called Quantum by Gilles Jobin Company. And it came out of a residency which happened at CERN last year called Collide at CERN, which is a 3-year program here at the facility. More about that later. But I would argue that particle physics is really everywhere at the moment in the arts, extraordinarily creating new sources of inspiration. An exhibition, for example, opened in Vienna on the first anniversary of the discovery of the Higgs boson. It's an exhibition at the Francis Thyssen Gallery in Vienna. This piece, which you can see here, is actually a piece which is a kind of interrogation between the Higgs boson and the event displays, which we do here at CERN, but also an interrogation with LSD. And it's a kind of commentary on intellect meeting suspended intellect and what comes out of that result. And Kerith Wynne Evans has been to CERN, has been a regular visitor at CERN, and often finds a lot of inspiration here within our particle physics, and continues throughout his career to do that. Equally, at the moment in the English-speaking world, there is a novel which is on the shortlist for the biggest prize in the English-speaking world, which is called A Tale for Time Being, and it absolutely is a book inspired by particle physics. The whole motif basically draws the analogy between fiction writing being the same as being a theoretical particle physicist. And as you read the book starts unraveling and really crossing across time and space in an extraordinary way. And then when you know that, you wouldn't be surprised to learn that there's now a new field emerging within literature, which is called quantum literature. And equally, there's another new field emerging, which is called quantum literary theory, if you would believe it. And basically, there was a paper just written the other day looking at quantum literary theory and saying, for example, that if you look at Heisenberg and if you look at Feynman, he sounds a bit like Beckett at times. Roger Penrose sounds like Thomas Pynchon. And certainly, if you look at them, there is some total similarities. For example, if you read this, you would think it was by Wittgenstein. Light and matter are both single entities, and the apparent duality arises in the limitations of our language. Who is that? Is that Heisenberg? Or is it Wittgenstein? Then you also have this, created and annihilated, what a waste of time. Is that Feynman? Or is that Beckett? So I'll leave that for you to discover. Equally, at the Avignon Theatre Festival this year, there was a dramatisation of Michel Houellebecq's The Elementary Particles. And that, again, is taking the whole dimensions of particle physics and making it part of theatre. And there's a long tradition in dance, actually, of engaging with particle physics, dating all the way from Karen Brown to up until, for example, Rambert Dance Company did an extraordinary piece 10 years ago called Constant Speed, which was very much an enactment and engagement with Brownian notions of emotion. of motion. So there's this extraordinary overlap and feeding, cross-feeding. Now, CERN, in a way, is a place which I think has some of the greatest sources of creativity, and that's because out of nothing, literally out of a cow field, comes today one of the world's largest particle physics labs, which really interrogates and looks at the known universe and, as I said, pushes our ideas really further. So here we're engaging with the arts as well, because to be part of culture in the 21st century, art is part of culture, just as much science and technology. And because CERN is a place which creates new ways of looking, where more appropriate than for artists to come to. So why should it all begin? Well, I've argued that at the moment we have this incredible moment where we're actually cross-fertilizing very much within the arts by the few examples I've given. I don't have time to go into a massive theory about it. But certainly the 20th century, if you look at the 20th century and how modernism was directly influenced by Einstein and theories of general relativity and Heisenberg, and how the uncertainty principle and theories of relativity really threw up notions of the observer. Where is the observer? Who is the observer? Does the observer change reality? What is the nature of reality? How does it exist? And Cubism came out of those kind of engagements. Many modernist movements did. But there's a cross-fertilization. It's not just one way, it's two-way. And this wonderful piece of writing, 3 Quarks for Mr. Mark, you may or may not recognize it. It's James Joyce. It's the very impenetrable Finnegan's Wake, which I was actually doing a MA dissertation on. And, but the fundamental word in there is quarks, which Murray Gell-Mann, the physicist, thought, that is the word I'm going to have for the fundamental particle. So it shows the two-way cross-exchange which we have in our culture. Though quark, of course, interestingly, was first used by Goethe at the time when the academies, there was no split between art and science, and there was much more of a cross-flow in our culture, in European culture. Here at CERN, when I first came here at CERN in 2009, I discovered a whole legacy of extraordinary artists who'd come to CERN and been inspired by CERN, but nobody had actually made a log of them or realized these incredible people were passing through our doors. So everybody from the Black Eyed Peas and will.i.am had been through, the Sex Pistols, as somebody said to me the other day, oh my goodness, what has the Sex Pistols got to do with particle physics? Well, if you talk to John Ellis, who's one of the leading theorists today, he would say it actually has everything to do with particle physics, because again, it's very much about pushing against a paradigm and really pushing further. Then if you carry on looking through the list, for example, Andreas Gursky, one of the world's leading photographers, Gwyneth Lewis, an extraordinary poet, amazing people have come here and really fed on the ideas of particle physics and then taken it out into culture. It's even inspired opera sets and you might recognize that if you know Atlas, the detector. It's exactly the same. Go and look up a picture of Atlas and you'll see there's a definite synergy. And as you came up the stairs, if you came up the stairs today in the main building, you will have seen this sculpture called Feeling Material, which was given to CERN by Anthony Gormley, one of a great international sculptor, who often engages with the notions of time and space in his work. For example, there's a big series he's done called Quantum Fields, and for him, he's obsessed by the body in space and the way it is. So CERN actually has had an engagement directly in the past, not only informally by artists coming through, but also in 2000, it had an artist in residency program, which was created in London and brought here, called Signatures of the Invisible. It was a landmark program in terms of art and science at the time, and really set the framework for art and science engagement internationally, actually. But when I came to CERN to look at what had actually happened, I also found that during that time there were some things which I could build on to create an artist residency program here at CERN. What there'd been before was quite random engagement. So one artist came for a day and left. Another came for 3 months and then had a lovely time. Another person came for 2 weeks. So it was quite unstructured and unconnected. And I talked to a lot of the scientists here and said, how was it for you? And they said, oh, we really wanted to talk to the artists and we had no contact with them or no engagement. We wanted them to be part of our community, to have a new way of looking at the world. And we just feel, ooh, why did that not happen? And the artists, the one who said he'd come for 1 day said he wanted somebody on the ground guiding him and acting as a bridge between particle physics and also his own thinking and work. But I would argue that artists and physicists are kind of twin souls, actually. If you look at particle physics, it divides into theorists who think beyond the paradigm and push the known world and think beyond in different dimensions. And then you look at experimentalists, and they test those theories and bring them down to earth. And that's what an artist does both those things. An artist is both a theorist and an experimentalist. And there you can see the artist Matthew Gardner and Fabiola Gianotti, who was a spokesperson for the Atlas experiment, and also had to choose, actually, between being a concert pianist or a particle physicist. And I would say in our culture, we have this moment where you have to choose between two things. And what we're trying to create here at CERN is the acknowledgement that actually you can be brilliant at different things and have expertise in different things. We shouldn't need to separate art and science as doggedly as we do. This is just a joke saying Einstein equals E equals mc squared. Well, I think if he was alive today, he would also say art plus science plus technology equals innovation, because in the 21st century, that's what we're looking at, but it also equals culture. Because they're all expressions of what it is to be human in this world. They just express them in different ways. Art's obviously through the senses, and engagement through feelings, and science and technology through different means. So, as you probably gathered, I really do believe we should be going back to the future and thinking about art and science. Being able to cross-fertilize and engage, it doesn't mean you lose the expertise in them, and that's very important to say, and the rigor within them, but we should be having much more of a dialogue, and that's actually happening now. Now, CERN's mission is the first one is to push back the frontiers of knowledge, and the arts is a form of knowledge. It's a form of knowledge through emotion, through the body, through the senses. So the arts program is something which brings that extra dimension to the mission of CERN. And so we began this whole arts journey here at CERN in 2011, putting the arts and the science on the same level. We started doing something dramatic, which wasn't using the arts as the slave to the science, to illustrate and describe the science. That's often done in science laboratories. What we did instead was bring them together on the same level of expertise. And we did that through peer review, by having an international competition every year and selecting artists to come here. Just as the scientists are selected, so should the artists be. And we also created cultural partnerships with organizations and the city of Geneva to actually create the framework for that, and a framework of cultural expertise and knowledge. We also created a policy, because you have to do these things when you're inside a big organization. You have to create the foundation. And it does what it says on the tin. It says great arts for great science, because it's bringing them both on the same level together, as I said. And it's funded, this whole scheme, through external funding, through our external partners and private donors. who fund the artists to come here, and I fundraise to make that happen. Now, I felt it was very, very important that we did that as well to bring the artists on the same level as the scientists. If scientists come with funding, the artists should come for funding. They shouldn't be seeking it themselves. So it's very important to get the social and the economic totally on a par with each other. So we have a board as well of people from different disciplines in Switzerland and France who are directors and very high-level directors in the arts. Beatrix Ruf is one of the world's leading power players in visual arts. She's director of the Kunsthaus Zurich. And Serge Dorny, who's on the opposite side, is the Director General of the Lyon Opera House. And Michael Dozer is obviously a physicist here at CERN. You may have seen him today, and he's here amongst us at the moment. And he's on the cultural board as well. So it's very important, as I said, bringing arts and science together to create mutual understanding. And we have creative patrons who have all visited CERN. So Jacques Herzog, the architect, if you look at his writings about architecture, you will really find some extraordinary similarities between quantum physics and high-energy particle physics, and that's precisely because he's influenced by those very subjects. Pippi Lotti-Rist, for example, also very inspired by particle physics. She was at the one of the performance of Quantum last night at CMS, and all these people have been inspired by particle physics. So what we created was something called Collide at CERN, creative collisions between the arts and science. And our first cultural partner of one of our strands is Ars Electronica Linz, which is one of the world's leading digital arts organizations. And we actually did a massive 6-day festival with them to announce our new Collide at CERN competition, but also to focus on CERN as potentially a place for the future and a collaborative model which can show the way society potentially could work in the future. And it's interesting, if you read the catalogue, to hear the discussions. Can culture, the arts, learn from science? Can science learn from culture? What is the crossover between the two? And as part of that, there were performances as well, and photography, as well as big symposium keynote speeches. Collide at CERN is an open international competition, as I said, and as I said, it comes in with economics on the same social scale. There's a brilliant book, which I always urge everybody to read, called The Gift by Lewis Hyde, which explains how important it is within culture to bring things on the same level of mutual exchange. And it's an extraordinary book which is also based on anthropology and also notions of particle physics and how we should be looking at the world as interconnected but mutually exchanged. And that has highly influenced my thinking for this whole project. When the artist comes here, they also have a dedicated science inspiration partner, and they work with them every single week. They meet them, but they can meet them as much as they like, but they have to meet them once a week. The artist also lives here totally like a physicist, in the sense they have an office here on site. So they have the same office as a physicist, which basically goes table, chair, window, blackboard if you're lucky, computer. That is a typical physicist's office. It really is. It's extraordinary, it's functional, it works. You put an artist in there, it's really interesting to see how they engage with the space. And as part of the residencies, the artists and the scientists have to do talks at the beginning and the ends of their residency, as well as blog the whole of the creative collisions. But what I've deliberately done with this residency, again, is drawing on the beauty of the spirit here of experimentation, is I've said there should be no output at the end of the 3 months residency. And that's really deliberate. That's a deliberate challenge to society. It's basically saying, artists exist to make, scientists also exist to make. Give them freedom and they will make something happen. Why should we say that at the end of 3 months something will happen? So I leave it open-ended and then I rest on my case, because Quantum, the choreography, came directly out of the residency here at CERN a year later. An artist exists to make, as I said, so does a scientist. So why should we be so product-driven in our society? So the actual residency has that kind of underlying message as well, and also engages with the spirit of CERN. Because after all, CERN created something from a cow field. So the first artist who came with us was Julius von Bismarck, who deliberately interrupts and interrogates society. This is something he created called the image fulgurator, a camera he pointed at press photographers, and then images appeared, whoops, when they went home, on their negatives. And they were like, what? How did that happen? That's because he interrupted them. And he was speed dated, I did speed dating with him, with James Wells, who's a specialist on hidden worlds. That was his inspiration partner. And they worked extraordinarily together. And out of that, James has said to me that he learnt so much that he feels that the whole of the way he looks at particle physics now has completely changed. Now, for a theorist to say that, who thinks beyond the paradigm, is quite extraordinary, actually. And so he went to the Ars Electronica Festival with us and actually came back with bags and bags of books. He was totally inspired. And he and Julius are creating an art piece, which we are placing somewhere in Europe next year. So it's kind of ... watch this space on that. Julius also created this piece called Versuchen zu Kreisen as part of his residency. Again, I rest my case. I said, no output. But he did an output because an artist exists to create. And Versuchen zu Kreisen is a piece which uses data, and every 78th turn, these lamps come into sequence, and then actually most of the time they're totally out of sequence, doing different turns. And that actually is now being used also as the installation for the dance piece Quantum. We also had a choreographer in residence last year, Gilles Jobin, who's the choreographer of Quantum. And during that time, he did interruptions in the space at CERN. Again, it's a way of creating new ways of looking in the laboratory. You're in the laboratory now. Just imagine if somebody came in here and started interrupting this. It creates new ways of engaging and thinking and looking at the world. So we had dancers inside the CERN library, the hallowed space of the CERN library, pretending to be invisible, moving through the space. This photograph went viral because that is a physicist working at his desk. Those are the dancers dancing. He carried on working. They carried on dancing. They left a note saying hello. He carried on working, didn't pick up the note until he left. This is a kind of meditation, really on focus. Physicists are incredibly focused. Dancers are incredibly focused. If you focus on being invisible, you focus on studying, both of you have that passion, that focus. Again, there's this way that particle physics and science and arts can learn from each other. They have a similarity in that way, which is extraordinary. But people started noticing when the dancers started ripping the books off the shelves and then plunging into the books. And that created, again, new ways of looking at the world, as you can imagine. Hallowed physics books suddenly turned into towers and spirals. We also went into the hallowed space of the worldwide, the grid, the computing grid, and interrupted that as well, which was extraordinary. So different ways of creating research and discovery, experimentation and play. I would argue those are fundamental to science, fundamental to the arts. And there's a way, particularly with particle physics, that these come into play and motion in an extraordinary way. And these kind of creative collisions are all about provoking society to think in different ways, to think about the connections between us all, about intervening in our own preconceptions about art and science being totally isolated and siloed. And also, it's all about creating innovation and going beyond, just like theory does. And we aspire here at CERN to go even further in the program that we're doing here in the arts, because why stay in one place? Always go further. And the creative spirit is unknown. And I would say, okay, the Higgs boson, that was a theory which has taken many years to prove. But have we got a formula for creativity? I open that up to you. No, we don't. That's the most elusive thing which we're still seeking. And I would say Collide at CERN is really like another experiment at CERN, which is trying to find that. At the moment, we have a sound sculptor with us this year, Bill Fontana. And he's using accelerometers and listening to structures, including the Large Hadron Collider, which he turned into a live musical instrument in July. We actually recorded the sounds of the LHC in February, and then took them down in July, and then played the sounds back to the LHC, which was kind of crazy. It was quite incredible, because about 12.2 seconds later, there was an echo, and the sound came back. And for one amazing moment, we all went, oh, it's gone round the ring. Well, no, it hadn't gone round the ring, but it was one of those moments where you just go, oh. And it's the way the arts can transform perception and take you somewhere else. And at the moment, we also have a filmmaker in residence with us, Jan Peters, who started last week. So it's kind of watch this space. But what we're trying to do is bring two-way knowledge and exchange on the same level, not enslaving one with the other. So the science can learn about the beauty of detours. One physicist said to me, he learned through engaging with the artists that actually detours can lead you somewhere, which normally there's a much more directionally focused way of looking at your work. But when an artist comes in and goes, ooh, and kind of engages in all the messiness, it creates a new way of looking at your own work. And then you see how an artist then processes the messiness and then creates it into a direction. It really creates a new pattern in thinking. So we would love to create new awards, but that's all dependent on funding. Though we have funding for a new award, which we'll be announcing in November, which is going to engage with the World Wide Web, which, as you know, was born here and was one of the great cultural phenomena. And after all, I would say knowledge is limited, however much we push and push and push. But imagination is the stuff which embraces all of us. And as ever, Albert Einstein says everything perfectly well and perfectly brilliantly. So that is basically Collide at CERN, but it's also showing how there's a mutual interchange and reciprocity which is possible, and to take us further in our culture. And we are at this amazing moment now where particle physics is really the stuff of excitement. And at the moment, we're working with Esa-Pekka Salonen, the Finnish conductor, in creating a new work. We've also just been working with Wolfgang Tillmans, the photographer, and many people and many young artists we're engaging with in creating a new modern multi-digital opera. So thank you very much for listening, and do come and speak to me afterwards.